I am now going to do something I never do, and will mince no words in the beginning of this review. Europa Universalis V is not just a fantastic game, not just an engaging strategy experience, but it is a monumental achievement on the part of Paradox, and not just arguably, but offers the best launch experience of a Paradox game I have ever played. No, it might not be as clearly polished as say CK3 was on launch, but EU5 does not have to be, because whereas CK3 was something of a CK2 too, EU5 is absolutely not an EU4 2. EU5 is its own game. It completely reinvents what an early modern grand strategy experience feels like, and does so with intent, a clear goal, and all the love for the genre in the world. If I had to summarize why I love Europa Universalis V so much, it must come down to this: that EU5 somehow feels like a reincarnation of the game design and passion behind Crusader Kings 2, the ambition of Imperator Rome, and the societal complexities of Victoria 3 all in one. But crucially, all in a package that, more than trying to look forward, attempts to look backwards at the same time to the golden age of computer strategy games, and has no reservations on why PC is the perfect platform for a complex experience. EU5 takes virtually no shortcuts. Its depth in representing cultures, religions, locations, resources, historical figures, events, units of war, the importance of navies, armies, estates, lawmaking, dynastic and royal intrigue, heraldry and the progression of time, technological advances, different ways to succeed, and how impossibly large and complex our world is. This is EU5's mission, and no other game out there, not EU4, not Victoria 3, not Medieval 2 or Empire Total War, not the Civilization or Age of Empire series, no strategy game has ever made me feel as invested, as overwhelmed, as in awe of the triumphant and monumental achievement that Europa Universalis V is. And this is only the launch version, a launch version that by no means is perfect, but where some quirks or shortcomings do nothing, absolutely nothing, to quell my love for what this experience is, and what it will be in the future. If you enjoy Paradox games and you have been excited for EU5, know that it is nothing like other Paradox games, and know that knowing Imperator, Vicky 3 or even EU4 will not, I repeat, will not help you. But if you take the plunge, if you watch or play the tutorials and you stick with the game, it will give you something nothing else can. And while you do, EU5's mind-blowingly beautiful soundtrack will lead you forward, as it has done for me. This is only the beginning, and you're goddamn right I recommend Europa Universalis V to anyone who follows my channel and have even the slightest interest in deep grand strategy games, our shared history, and their combination. Because if you love Crusader Kings 2 or 3, Imperator Rome, or Victoria 3, Europa Universalis V is the combination of all of these, but with the theme and time period of EU4, and it really, truly succeeds. For the past 2 months, EU5 has taken up so much of my time that other great experiences have been left somewhat by the wayside. So before I begin, I wanted to give a shout out to the fantastic indie game Master and Command, a strategy game that also takes place in one of the same eras EU5 offers, but which focuses in on Europe in the 18th century. I want to make this clear. This is not a sponsored shoutout. I'm doing this for the love of the game and because I wish to support passionate indie devs that explore games in their own way. So if you're interested in EU5, I am certain Master and Command will be of interest as well. Make sure to check out both. And with that out of the way, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and let me tell you about this leviathan of a game. Europa Universalis V takes place from 1337 to 1836, which makes it not just one of the longest Paradox game timelines in history with 500 years to explore, including the medieval age in this one, but I will venture to say that in real time, it actually is the longest Paradox game ever made, simply because time literally moves by the hour in an almost Hearts of Iron style fashion, but with so much more to tend to. This means that my Norway campaign, which you can watch here by the way, I spent about 80 hours between the years of 1337 to 1639, with 200 years left to go basically. Now of course people will play differently, some like to play on faster speeds more often, and countries will have more or less to do in the same time frame. But regardless of all of these, there is no contest. EU5 offers the longest lasting campaigns in any Paradox game I've ever played. And look at this map! EU5 spans the entire globe much like EU4, Hearts of Iron 4 and Victoria 3, but it does so with a host of more playable countries. A map that feels like twice the size of already large Victoria 3 map in terms of real space, and certainly offers more locations and provinces than any of them. If you think I'm rambling right now and going off about simple facts, it's kind of because I am. I'm trying to set the stage for how large EU5 actually is, how much there is to do and see here, and how many experiences you are offered. I am by no means exaggerating when I say that it is insane, initially overwhelming and perhaps even terrifying, but it is all things that ensures that EU5 will not just stand the test of time, but do so with a variety and depth in gameplay you've not seen anywhere else. It can be tough to know who the player actually is in Paradox games. The easiest one might just be Crusader Kings, because there you're literally yourself, the character in the corner. But in every other Paradox game, you're kind of assuming the role of the spirit of the nation, the mover that decides what gets built, who gets recruited, which colonies are explored, who you go to war with, and which laws are tabled before Parliament. But because of all the systems surrounding these decisions, every choice is a question of risk versus reward, and push versus pull. You spend not just hard-earned money on raising a building, but building somewhere in location X will of course prevent you from building in location Y if you are short on money. In the same way, giving one of your country's estates a privilege will also give them more power and make other estates less happy, while perhaps also jeopardizing your own crown power. Indeed, just in that sentence I said what must come across as jargon to the uninitiated, but unless you've extensively followed dev diaries or tutorials already, nearly everything in EU5 will sound like jargon at first. Because what is an RGO? What is DHE? How is a personal union different from a marriage union? What is an international organization? What is a location versus a province? How is a fiefdom different from a vassal, an appanage, a dominion, or a tributary? What is the difference between proximity and control? EU5's vocabulary of systems is larger than anything else, and as my colleague Leanna over at IGN said in their review, like a metal plane in the sky, it feels incredible that this piece of machinery gets off the ground and manages to stay soaring through the sky. But it does. I think the simplest way of explaining how EU5 is different from EU4 is that whereas EU4 feels like a digitalized board game with abstract levers that can be spent in the game, like the Monarch points, EU5 is a true historical simulation. Here you'll find an actual population system where everyone has not just a culture, not just a religion, not just a place in society as part of an estate like the commoners, nobles or clergy, but they can and will change their occupations, locations, and belief systems depending on what is happening in the game, and depending on your influence. All of these people are simultaneously simulated in real numbers, meaning that every location will have a population from single digits to the millions later in the game, and they also require their needs met not just for substance like food, but for their jobs and factories as well, so that your economy actually moves forward. To do that, you must take advantage of your realm's bounty, but your cities are of course not just cities. In fact, at game start, there are comparatively very few cities in the game. The locations in the game, which is the smallest unit of land but where everything goes down, go from rural to towns to cities. Rural locations are inhabited mostly by peasants and laborers, while the larger cities will see laborers and merchants, i.e. burghers, take up more and more of the local population. On top of these come nobles, the clergy, and soldiers, each of which are quote-unquote promoted from the peasant class based on the buildings you build, their literacy levels, and their profitability. This in turn is influenced by your market, where markets combine the locations and provinces within that market with their resources, but can also trade, both import and export, goods to and from that market, based on things like control, trade capacity, and trade advantage, all contributing to where you can best send and receive goods to and fro. While all of this is happening, you have to make sure to think of your budget, which is now controlled not just by levers, but by your power and influence versus that of your estates. Taxation, for example, is governed by how happy your estates are, their privileges, which determine max tax rate, and how much you wish to stretch that band. Minting is where a lot of your money will come from too, but minting governs inflation, So if you mint too much, you will indeed get more money, but everything in your country will become more expensive over time, creating a negative spiral for prices both for you and your people. Minting less than you need has a deflationary effect on existing inflation, but will of course lower your immediate income. You must pay for the cost of your court, which determines legitimacy, your army, navy and fort maintenance, which govern their fighting ability, and so on and so forth. The same goes for diplomacy, where you now have a diplomatic capacity that determines how many relationships you may have at the same time without overextending yourself, and how many diplomats you can actually use at any given time. The fact that every number in the game feels simulated and incremental rather than something abstract helps to create that sense of true governance and depth in a way even EU4 could not. All of these mechanics, to me, is what takes us away from that sense of EU4 board gameness to an actual strategic simulation, the likes of which we have never seen, frankly. Now, these are a lot of mechanics to get your head around, and add on to that resources, affordability of buildings, markets, and of course, advances that replaces technology and ideas. It truly is a lot to take in. Even though it is wise to learn these things yourself over time, I have myself yet to understand everything as much as I'd like. But for this, EU5 introduces an incredibly clever automation system. Tick everything on, and EU5's national AI can effectively run the entire country for you behind the scenes while you make the power moves. But of course, doing that kind of defeats much of the purpose of playing the game at all. For me though, I find it very helpful for the first dozen or 100 hours to automate exactly 3 things. Production methods, which means that buildings will automatically make the best use of resources when they can. The closing and opening of buildings so that you're not wasting money on things you don't necessarily need. And market automation, meaning that the AI will act as your importer-exporter. In terms of the market, this is in all honesty also kind of immersive, because it means that depending on the people and resources in your country, it will feel like your market is this dynamic, ever-changing, self-regulating thing that the spirit of the nation, i.e. you, shouldn't really control all the time. You can, however, delegate part of that market control dynamically between you and the AI if there are some resources you desperately want, while for the most part allowing the AI to do its thing. But in these ways, EU5 clearly gives you as much autonomy and control as you want, while also providing you with much needed help when you're dipping your feet in, and are simply trying to learn how to walk, run, and then fly. Perhaps the most controversial changes EU5 makes, in my opinion, is the complete removal of the signature EU4 mission trees. Now, missions are technically in the game, but only for the tutorial, which for all intents and purposes means they are not in the game, even though they are likely to become part of mods in the future. I love missions because they made it feel as though in a big sandbox world where everything is possible, that you got those neat and immersive chapters you could choose to follow and complete, and in a way accomplish historical feats that created a compelling story for your nation. EU5's much larger sandbox experience do not feature missions, but instead introduces a system of situations. Situations are time-sensitive events that influences the region they concern, and include events like the 100 Years' War for England, France and the surrounding countries, the Western Schism, and the Reformation. Situations are legitimately a really cool concept in that they simulate historical events, which again adds to the sense that EU5 is more of a historical simulator, and it brings a lot of flavor to all factions involved. However, the thing about situations in its current state is that they are not necessarily as impactful nor as interactive as they feel like they should be. Situations like the Western Schism, for example, are hard to understand, not just why they come about every game, but it's hard to see what you can do to influence it in either direction. It becomes a thing that's just there kind of, while it feels like it should be much more involved and movable. The same sadly goes for things like the Reformation, an incredibly important thing. The Reformation is such a pivotal moment in an EU game, but in the version of the game I've played, the Reformation never truly takes off on a geopolitical level. Few countries convert, even though almost half of the European population converts, and there are few manual levers to change the outcome of that. As far as I'm aware, there is no diplomatic or sneaky way to influence the religion of other countries other than through the irregular spy network options to support rebels and the like. In other words, I wish situations had more flavor and options to and within them, because even though they are great in concept, they sometimes feel like they kind of just exist. I also do not believe missions and situations are mutually exclusive at all, so their removal seems to be purely a design decision made by the dev team because they did not want them in the game. While I respect that, and while EU5 certainly works perfectly well without them, I do think that either missions a la EU4 or some type of journal entry like in Victoria 3 would only add to the experience. And even though they might come with mods, I do not believe they will allow for achievements, which does make me question if I wish to use them at all, which of course lessens my hype for any type of mod honestly. I am a big fan of how CK3 and Wiki 3 have dealt with mods and achievements, allowing for basically anything since the unbelievably vast number of mods make the game harder or more immersive rather than easier, and I wish EU5 would do the same. While EU5 for the vast majority works really well, there are a few systemic issues I would like to see fixed as soon as possible. Two of the most important ones are related to the AI. First and most importantly is the question of rebellions and revolts, both in your own vassals and in other independent countries. Many countries experience almost constant revolts, making it hard for them to develop and create a country that can stand the test of time. In addition, many countries have acted too timid, meaning that even stronger nations have had trouble expanding and colonizing, making for somewhat slower or unchanging maps over the course of the centuries. Both of these leave a damper on the experience at times and are definitely things that need fixing. The good news is that Paradox are aware of both of these issues. They have already made the AI somewhat more aggressive and likely to act more independently, for example. For the AI revolts, I do believe they have figured out what the main problems are there as well, and it's likely related to the AI's handling of policies for their estates, or rather, their non-handling, which creates constant unhappy estates and therefore constant revolts. I believe both of these issues have contributed to making experiences where the world of EU5 does not evolve as much as one would have wanted, especially for the rise of the Turks perhaps, who mainly remain east of Anatolia. However, this is also a careful balancing act. Due to EU5 being a sandbox simulator, and because historical events were never predetermined, and I think a lot of people forget this, it should be completely fine for historical empires to never truly form. And I think that is okay, at least for some games. In addition, I think an underappreciated feature of historical superpowers not necessarily forming all the time is that we get a game where many major powers still manage to rise up. In my Norway game, for example, Europe is positively flushed with these middle powers. England, France, Castile, Two Sicilies, Bohemia, Hungary, Poland, Kiev, and of course my own Norway, all of these are individually powerful and can in concert with others challenge the current two superpowers of France and Bohemia. However, the problem arises when these powers actually do not wage war against each other, and also when they do not create alliances that fight other alliances. Ironically, the rule of the game a few patches back was that countries would create two powerful alliances, but mostly only for defensive purposes, so the alliances weren't even used to wage war and create a more dynamic map, resulting instead in a standstill and the aptly named hug box situation. Again, it's a balancing act, and this is just the beginning of EU5. I have no doubt a lot of work in the coming weeks and months will go towards AI behavior specifically, but for now, there's still some work to be had here. In terms of dynastic policies and gameplay, I have essentially taken a 180 turn on these 3D character models and their place in the game. I love them, I think they're the best and most realistic looking characters in a Paradox game, and I actually want more character interactions. EU5 does strike a good balance between EU4's minimal interaction and the more somewhat confused role of characters in Imperator Rome perhaps, but I would like to see even more options added for characters in the future, and more customization options like outfits and the like. It is also very fun how much dynastic policy plays a role in the political environment. Royal marriages create not just dynastic lines, but they give you unions between countries, unions that can turn into powerful political blocks. Unions even have their own parliaments and laws, mechanics I wish would be fleshed out even more by the way. For example, annexing a union member should not be something done through the regular diplomatic annexation channels, and should not take 400 years, but something that should be handled through an act or process of the union parliament, just like we have examples of historically. Warfare in EU5 is positively incredible, while probably being the most similar in terms of gameplay to EU4 of anything in EU5. Armies are controlled the same way, moving from tile to tile, but now you have much bigger range in terms of units, their upgrades, and even their place in your army's formation, which is made up of a center and 2 flanks. The battle screen is fantastic, showcasing the real-time actions of the different formations, and if one flank is defeated, the opposing flank now collapses on what remains. The visual presentation of warfare in the Paradox games that utilize these one-tile battles have never looked this good, especially considering that armies are now dynamically represented and updated not just by their numbers, but by culture, makeup, technology, and available weaponry. Battles are filled by smoke when gunpowder becomes more available, and it just looks so freaking good. Even though I do believe Victoria 3's frontline system still looks incredible for that system, EU5 has likely perfected the traditional tile-based battle system, and I'm really happy where Warfare is going, both visually and mechanically. Note also that EU5's use of soldiers actually mimics that of Imperator Rome or CK3 here. You begin the game with simply raising levies to wage war, but over time, professional armies become a thing, allowing you to make use of standing armies that are stronger than the peasant levies. The same goes for navies as well, which must not just be used for troop transport, but for naval battles, blockades, and importantly, ensuring maritime presence in friendly waters to secure trade and proximity and lower piracy if present. It's a great way to not just simulate the complexities of warfare, but to make the game's earlier period feel drastically different from the later ones, and helps create that sense of deep dynamism. Europa Universalis V is a leviathan of a game, an experience that's so hard to compress into one review because there simply is so much variety, complexity, and nuance here. Yes, I would like more fun and dynamic situations. Yes, the AI needs work. Yes, there needs to be less revolts in AI nations. Yes, I would love more unique city models on the map. And yes, it does feel a little strange that EU5's 3D map does not look as beautiful as the map of updated CK3 or Victoria 3, and arguably even EU4, as EU5's map features amongst other things only 2D trees, a somewhat non-sharp terrain image with sometimes ugly shaped mountains, and a rather tame looking ocean, which also lacks shadows drawn from ship models. I would have loved improvements here, but thankfully, it makes up for these lacks in sheer and raw unmatched scope, actual dynamic city sprawl, great battle animations, and the feeling that everything you do has a deep and complex impact on the game. And of course, I find EU5's flat map to be one of the most beautiful quote-unquote paper maps in Paradox history, and for a map lover, that goes a long way. You can, of course, and revolutionary so I would say, play the whole game purely on that flat map level, which is a crazy cool option to have, and which will also significantly increase the performance of your game. When all is said and done, this you can be certain of. This is likely the greatest grand strategy game ever made, and which despite a few quirks, overcomplicated UI choices here and there, and some AI balancing issues, offers such a solid foundation that no other title comes close. It is so feature-rich, offers so much flavor and so many unique events that you'd think the game had existed for 3 years already. And the thing is, EU5's mechanics and features even holds the promise of so many fantastic mods down the line. Because it feels so much like a combination of CK2, Imperator, and Victoria, I don't see why some crazy goober won't attempt to make this the Paradox magnum opus that spans the entire thing, or at the very least, it's so incredibly possible to make this feel like its own Roman game, a pure medieval game, or a purely early modern imperial game. And that is something I cannot say for other titles. And so, like I said in the very beginning, EU5 has already become one of my favorite Paradox games. Is arguably the grandest strategy game ever made, is absolutely fantastic in its own right, is the perfect sequel, and comes across as truly ambitious. I absolutely recommend EU5 and cannot wait to see where it goes from here. There is a thousand things I have not mentioned in this review, but if you enjoyed it and have your own thoughts, share them with me in the comments, leave a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel for more. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!